My father cleared his throat, a sound that used to command my respect, but now only triggered a cold, clinical curiosity in me. I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, the very place where I'd learned that my job in this world was to be the floor mat for everyone else's muddy boots. Around the living room, they sat in perfect, suffocating formation. My mother, clutching a tissue she didn't need, my sister Emily, wearing a smile so victorious it practically glowed in the dim afternoon light, and David, my husband, the man who had promised to cherish me, looking like he was about to vomit on the Persian rug I'd paid to have cleaned last Christmas. "Evelyn, sit down. We need to talk," my father said, gesturing to the single empty chair positioned directly in the center of the room. A stage. They had built a stage. And I was the reluctant lead. But here's the thing about being the reliable daughter your entire life. People assume you're naive because you're quiet. They think you're a pushover because you don't scream. They never suspect that while they've been playing checkers, you've been rebuilding the entire chessboard. Before we get into how I turned this intervention into the funeral of their reputations, I want to know, have you ever been the dependable one in your family, only to realize you were just being used? Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I'm reading all of them, and if you believe that being underestimated is a superpower, hit that like and subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this chess match ends. Growing up, Emily and I were like two sides of a very unbalanced coin. I was the one with the perfect grades, the one who worked 2 part-time jobs while finishing my teaching degree just to help my parents with the mortgage. Emily was the creative spirit. In our house, that was code for unaccountable. When she failed math, I spent my weekends tutoring her while she scrolled through her phone. When she crashed my father's car at 17, I was the one who emptied my savings account to cover the insurance deductible so he wouldn't lose his mind. When she couldn't find an apartment because her credit score looked like a temperature in the Arctic, I was the one who co-signed. I was Saint Evelyn, the patron saint of cleaning up other people's messes. But the irony of being the golden child in my parents' eyes was that it never belonged to me. That honor was reserved for Emily. I was just the infrastructure. I was the walls that kept the house standing, the roof that kept the rain out. You don't thank the walls for being there, you only notice them when they start to crack. And my family had spent 28 years trying to see how much weight I could carry before I finally snapped. According to family logic, my success wasn't an achievement. It was an insult to Emily. If I got a promotion, I was showing off. If I bought a nice car, I was making her feel inferior. My life was supposed to be a gray backdrop so that Emily's colorful chaos could shine brighter. Then came David, sweet, hard-working, sensible David. He was an accountant, methodical, organized, and seemingly devoted. When we met at that small coffee shop 3 years ago, I thought I had finally found someone who saw me. And not the fixer, but the woman. He didn't ask me to solve his problems. He asked me how I liked my coffee. 2 sugars, no cream. He remembered it every single morning for 3 months before he even asked for my number. When I brought him home, my parents were politely impressed. A stable man with a stable career. "He's good for you, Evelyn," my mother had said. "He'll keep you grounded." What she meant was, "He's boring enough that he won't distract us from Emily's latest crisis." Even Emily seemed to approve. I remember that night clearly. We were in the kitchen, the scent of roast chicken still lingering in the air. "He's actually cute," she'd whispered, her eyes fixed on David through the glass door as he talked to my father about tax brackets. I expected some nerdy stereotype, but those green eyes, they're gorgeous. I should have listened to the hunger in her voice. I should have recognized that Emily never wanted what was hers. She only ever wanted what belonged to someone else. My toys, my friends, my peace of mind. And now, she had set her sights on my husband. The shift happened slowly, like a leak in the basement that you ignore until the floorboards start to rot. After the wedding, family dinners became a gauntlet of micro-betrayals. Emily would wear dresses that were just a little too short, sit just a little too close to David, and ask for his expert advice on things she'd never cared about before. "David, I'm so bad with money. Can you look at my budget?" David, I need a man's perspective on this guy I'm seeing. What do you think? David, you and Evelyn are so lucky. I hope I find a man exactly like you someday. She wasn't looking for a man like David. She was looking for David. I brought it up to him once, late at night, the glow of the street lamp filtering through our bedroom curtains. Does Emily seem intense to you lately? I'd asked, trying to sound casual. And David just laughed, that warm, reassuring sound that I used to trust. She's just being friendly, Ev. She looks up to you. She probably thinks that by being near me, she's closer to the stability you have. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative, that my sister was hunting my husband and my husband was enjoying the chase, was a poison I wasn't ready to swallow. 3 months ago, the busy season at David's accounting firm turned into something else. He was working late every night. His phone, which used to be an afterthought, became an extension of his hand. He took it to the bathroom. He kept it face down on the nightstand. When a notification chirped, his eyes would dart to the screen with a flash of guilt that he wasn't fast enough to hide. I'm a teacher. I deal with third graders who think they're masters of deception because they hid a crayon behind their back. I know when someone is lying. The breakthrough didn't come from a dramatic confrontation. It came from the cloud. David was brilliant with numbers, but he was lazy with technology. He'd forgotten that our laptops were synced to a shared family account. One Tuesday evening, while he was at the office, I opened the photo stream to look for a picture of our dog. What I found was a gallery of my own destruction. Photos of Emily in a red dress I'd never seen. Text threads that didn't just cross the line, they erased it. Plans for emergency meetings that were actually afternoon trysts at a boutique hotel downtown. I sat there in the dark for 3 hours, the blue light of the laptop screen etching the betrayal into my retinas. I expected to cry. I expected to scream and break the wedding china, but instead, a strange, crystalline calm settled over me. For 28 years, I had been the one who fixed things, and in that moment, I realized that some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be demolished. While they were busy falling in love, I was busy going to school. They didn't know about the night classes I'd been taking. They didn't know about the paralegal certification I was weeks away from finishing. They didn't know that I had spent my lunch breaks in the school library, not grading papers, but studying the fine print of our marriage contract and my grandmother's inheritance. You see, David thought he owned his accounting firm. He'd forgotten, or perhaps he'd just assumed I'd never bring it up, that the seed money, the office lease, and the primary investment funds came from the life insurance policy my grandmother left specifically to me. I began to move, quietly, methodically. I applied for a position at a prestigious private school in Seattle. I didn't tell a soul when I got the offer, a 40% raise and a relocation package that would whisk me away from this toxic zip code. I met with a forensic accountant who was a friend from my college days. I showed him David's business expenses. Every dinner at Romano's, every client gift that ended up in Emily's closet was documented. In the state we lived in, proving adultery was one thing, but proving the dissipation of marital assets for an affair? That was where the real leverage lived. 2 weeks ago, I told David I was going to a teacher's conference. Instead, I sat in my car across from Emily's apartment. I watched him pull up in that sensible Honda Civic I'd helped him pick out. I watched her come to the door, glowing in that same red dress. They went to Romano's, our place, the place where he'd told me he wanted to grow old with me. I walked up to the window and watched them through the glass. They looked like a perfect couple. The creative spirit and her steady anchor. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't see me standing in the shadows of the street. I took a single photo, not for a lawyer, but for myself, a reminder of exactly what I was leaving behind. I called my attorney that night. Accelerate it, I told him. I want the papers served, the accounts frozen, and the locks changed by Sunday afternoon. Which brings us back to the living room. My mother cleared her throat again. Evelyn, sweetheart, this is hard for us to say, but Emily and David, they found something special, something we don't think you can understand. I looked at David. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I looked at Emily. She looked like she'd just won the lottery. "You've always been the strong one, Evelyn," my father added, his voice heavy with that familiar, manipulative warmth. "We know you'll do what's best for the family. We think it's time for a transition." They wanted me to hand over my husband, my dignity, and probably my house, also Emily wouldn't have to feel guilty about her betrayal. They expected St. Evelyn to offer a blessing and a check for the moving van. I leaned back in the chair they'd picked for me. I smoothed the fabric of my navy blue dress, the one David had bought me for our anniversary with the money I'd earned. "A transition," I repeated, the word tasting like copper in my mouth. "That's an interesting way to put it, because I've been planning a transition of my own." I reached into my purse and pulled out the first of the manila envelopes. "David, you might want to look at this before you say another word about feelings." The silence in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Specifically, the knife my sister had been twisting in my back for the last 3 months. David's hand shook as he reached for the first envelope. I watched his eyes scan the bold, capitalized letters at the top of the page. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." You signed these 3 days ago?" David's voice was a ghost of itself. "I did," I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's. "While you were at Romano's, promising Emily a future built on my silence, I was at my lawyer's office, ensuring that future would be as hollow as your promises." Emily's victorious glow vanished, replaced by a look of sharp, defensive panic. Evelyn, you can't be serious. People make mistakes. Love isn't something you can just litigate away." "You're right, Emily," I replied, turning to face her. "Love isn't, but assets are. And since you've always been so interested in what belongs to me, I thought I'd show you exactly what's left for you to take." I placed the second envelope on the table. This one was thicker, stuffed with bank statements, investment portfolios, and the original partnership agreement for David's firm. "My father always said I was the reliable one," I said, looking at my parents, who were frozen like statues on the sofa. And I was reliable enough to read every single contract David ever put in front of me. I was reliable enough to remember that the $200,000 seed investment for David's firm didn't come from a bank loan. It came from Grandma's life insurance, my inheritance. David's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. "Ev, that was a joint venture." We talked about this." "No, David, you talked. I listened, and then I modified the operating agreement before I signed it. You thought you were the primary stakeholder because your name was on the door. But according to Section 4.2 of the amended filing, which you signed in a hurry before your first big client meeting with Emily, I am the majority owner, and as of 9 a.m. yesterday, I have officially withdrawn all capital support. The firm's credit line, frozen, the office lease, terminated as of the end of the month." My mother finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. "Evelyn, this is cruel. How can you do this to your own husband? To your sister? They made a mistake, but this is calculated." "Calculated?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "You want to talk about calculation, Mom? Let's talk about the family meeting you had last Tuesday, the one where you and Dad told Emily that I was strong enough to handle the divorce and that David's business was the priority. You were willing to sacrifice my marriage, my home, and my stability just so Emily wouldn't have to feel like a homewrecker. You didn't want what was right. You wanted what was easy." I stood up, and for the first time in 28 years, I felt taller than everyone in that room. "The house is in my name. My lawyer has already filed the paperwork to have David removed. You have 48 hours to get your things out, David. And Emily? Since you love David so much, I'm sure you won't mind helping him navigate the bankruptcy of his firm. After all, you're the creative spirit. Maybe you can create some money out of thin air." As I walked toward the door, Emily scrambled after me. "Evelyn, wait! We're family! You can't just walk away like this." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the wreckage of my old life. "We were never family, Emily. We were a hierarchy, and I'm officially resigning from the bottom of it." 3 days later, I was driving across the state line. Every mile that put distance between me and that living room felt like a year of trauma falling off my shoulders. I didn't cry. I didn't put on sad songs. I listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the sound of my own breathing. Seattle welcomed me with a gray, misty sky that felt more honest than the manufactured sunshine of my hometown. My new apartment was a revelation. It was on the 12th floor, overlooking the Puget Sound. It was cold, modern, and, most importantly, it was mine. No motivational posters about fiscal responsibility that David used to hide his insecurities. No lingering scent of Emily's expensive, cloying perfume. Just the smell of fresh rain and new beginnings. I spent the first week in a trance of productivity. I set up my classroom at the private school. My new colleagues were brilliant, independent, and respected my boundaries without me even having to set them. For the first time, I wasn't the teacher who fixes everything. I was just Evelyn, an expert in her field. But while my new life was beginning, my old one was rotting in real time. My phone became a battlefield. First came the texts from David. They started with anger. "How could you ruin me? You're a monster, Evelyn. I gave you the best years of my life." I didn't respond. I just archived the messages for my lawyer. Then came the bargaining. "Ev, please. I'll end it with Emily. I've already moved out. I'm in therapy. We can fix the firm. I need you." Still, I said nothing. Indifference is a much louder answer than anger. Then came the calls from my parents. My mother's voicemails were a masterclass in guilt. "Amelia, your sister is moving back into her old room. She's devastated. David is sleeping on our couch. The neighbors are talking. Please, just come home for a weekend so we can talk this out as a family. We miss our daughter." I listened to that one while sitting on my balcony, watching a ferry cross the water. I realized then that they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that made their lives work. They missed the St. Evelyn who paid the insurance deductibles and tutored the failing sister. They missed the floor mat. The most satisfying update, however, came from my cousin Rachel. She was the only one I hadn't blocked, mostly because she enjoyed the tea as much as I did. David's partner bought him out, Rachel told me over a video call, but only for pennies on the dollar because the firm was bleeding clients. Everyone found out about the affair, Ev. In a small town, no one wants a creative accountant who cheats with his sister-in-law. Emily is miserable. She thought she was getting a wealthy businessman. Now she has a guy with a mountain of debt and a bruised ego. She's already complaining that he's too needy. I smiled into my coffee. The irony was delicious. Emily had stolen the prize, only to realize the prize was only valuable because I was the one polishing it. The peace didn't last forever. One Saturday morning, 6 weeks after I'd left, there was a knock at my door. I checked the security camera, a high-end system I'd installed the day I moved in. It was Emily. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her expensive red dress replaced by a wrinkled sweatshirt. She looked small. I opened the door, not out of pity, but for closure. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Rachel," she whispered. I begged her. I told her I was suicidal. "I'm not, I needed to see you." She walked into my living room and stood by the window, and staring at the view she couldn't afford, and a life she couldn't replicate. "You really did it," she said. "You just left." I didn't leave, Emily. I graduated. I finished the course of being your emotional safety net. "David is a shell of a person," she said, her voice cracking. "He cries every night. He keeps calling your name in his sleep. I thought if I had him, I'd finally feel like I was the winner. But being with him just makes me feel like I'm holding a trophy that someone else threw in the trash." I sat down on my velvet sofa, feeling a profound sense of calm. "That's because David wasn't the trophy, Emily. The trophy was the respect I gave myself. You thought you could steal my happiness, but you didn't realize that my happiness wasn't attached to David. It was built by me. You stole a person. I built a foundation." "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked, the tears finally falling. I looked at her, the girl I had tutored, protected, and funded for nearly 3 decades. I already have, Emily, but forgiveness doesn't mean a seat at my table. It just means I've stopped carrying the weight of your choices. You should leave now. Thanksgiving in Seattle was unlike any holiday I'd ever experienced. There was no shouting, no passive-aggressive comments about my superiority, and no cleaning up Emily's wine spills. I hosted a dinner for my new friends: Marcus, the history teacher from my school; Janet, my neighbor who had taught me how to sail; and Sarah, my yoga instructor. We sat around my kitchen island, the one I'd chosen myself, and laughed until our sides ached. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my father: "We're sitting down to dinner. Your chair is empty. We hope you're happy with what you've done." I didn't feel the usual pang of guilt. I didn't feel the urge to call and apologize for existing. I simply swiped the notification away and raised my glass. "To second chances," Marcus said, clinking his glass against mine. "To choosing yourself," I added. Later that night, as the guests left and the city lights twinkled against the dark water of the Sound, I realized that the reliable daughter had finally done something truly reliable. I had relied on myself. I'm Evelyn. I'm 28 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm not anyone's backup plan. I'm the main event. If you've spent your life being the one everyone takes for granted, let this be your sign. You don't have to wait for them to appreciate you. You just have to stop giving them the power to devalue you. Drop a "ready" in the comments if you're building your own empire this year. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because this is just the beginning of the new Evelyn,